A bill to avoid a government shutdown and suspend the debt limit now faces a tough partisanship battle in the Senate. The House passed the bill on Tuesday, but in the other chamber, all 50 Democrats would need at least 10 Republicans to join them in order for the spending bill to pass, and so far no GOP members have signaled their support. But lawmakers on both sides agree that the country's debt limit needs to be raised, and experts warn that failure to do so could result in an economic catastrophe. For more, I want to bring in Sarah Ewall-Wice. She's a CBS News reporter covering economic policy. Sarah, good to have you. First of all, just remind us what the debt ceiling is and why we have it.
So the debt ceiling is how much money the United States government can borrow. And just to be very clear, this is how much money the government can borrow to pay its debt obligations. This is not greenlighting new spending whatsoever. And really, we've had this debt ceiling in place for more than 100 years. It was first implemented by Congress back in 1917, and then it was expanded to include all debts in 1939. But since then, the United States has raised or suspended the debt limit more than 100 times. It has gone up trillions of dollars. So this is just one more time where Congress is forced to address it. Most recently, they suspended it in 2019, but that was for 2 years, and then it expired at the end of July.
So how much debt does the country currently have, and how is the government handling those debt payments?
So right now, the United States has about $28.5 trillion of debt. About $7.8 trillion of that was added during the Trump administration over those 4 years. And it was suspended or addressed 3 times under the Trump administration. So this is the first time it's being addressed under the Biden administration. So when the debt limit suspension expired at the end of July, Treasury started using what's called extraordinary measures. Basically, I call this financial gymnastics to allow the United States to continue paying its bills. And basically what it includes is suspending the sale of some securities. It also includes redeeming or suspending investments in some funds. Basically, when the impasse over the debt limit comes to a close, the idea is the Treasury would replenish those funds, including the interest involved as well. But right now, they're basically going through those extraordinary measures, and when those are exhausted and the United States runs down its cash on hand, the United States will be unable to pay its bills and could easily go into default, which would be the first time in U.S. history.
So I want to dig into that, but even before that, we're talking about the government being able to make its payment to its creditors. So who are those creditors? Who holds the government's debt?
So the large majority of this debt is held by the public. Some of it is also held by government agencies. But when you look at the debt held by the public, this includes state and local governments, this includes private investors, and this also includes the Federal Reserve, but it also includes foreign debt holders as well. About more than $7.5 trillion of that is held by foreigners, and this includes over $1 trillion by Japan. They hold the most debt, as well as China holds over $1 trillion, and then the United Kingdom holds over $500 billion of that. So altogether, we're looking at 28.5, but it's broken down much more depending on the public debt versus some of the government debt, as well as even further down, including among foreigners.
So Sarah, as you said, if an agreement on the debt ceiling isn't reached, then the debt payments can't be made, and the government would potentially then go into default. Tell us how that scenario would impact the U.S. economy, and how everyday Americans, our viewers, how all of us would be impacted by that.
Yes. So, I mean, basically, we've been warned by economists, by financial experts, by former government officials, by business leaders, that the U.S. going into default would be catastrophic. Basically, we're told that if the U.S. did go into default, it would reverse the economic recovery, the gains we've made since the coronavirus pandemic. It would put us back in a recession. It would roil the markets. And for those who see this and wondering how does it impact everyday life, here's basically what it would do is if the United States can't pay its bills, it means that Social Security payments that people rely on will not go out. Those who are receiving food assistance would stop receiving those benefits. Our troops would go unpaid. Our civilian federal employees, they would not receive their pay. There's a number of different things that this would happen and impact everyday people as the U.S. can't pay its bills. But one analysis that really stood out this week as well was by Moody Analytics, the financial firm. Basically, they said that if the U.S. went into default, Americans would be digging out for generations. And they said if this were to be a prolonged situation where Congress and lawmakers were not able to come to an agreement to address this crisis, it could mean 6 million jobs would be lost. The unemployment rate could go back up to nearly 9%. And about a third of stock prices would be wiped out. That would be about $15 trillion in wealth in the United States. So all in all, just a really ugly picture should this happen.
Really high stakes game of chicken. Sarah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.